If you have been doing this long enough, like I have, there are days when you have your 5 headlines completely written, where you really are prepared to go all in on Barca and what is a rather dull performance against Valencia. And then there are days when Robert Lewandowski comes in stoppage time and changes your whole script. So let's do it. The new 5 headlines from Barcelona's 1-0 win over Valencia. 1 is final chance. There was a few weeks ago when somebody called out that I had not put Lewandowski as one of my headlines, and I didn't respond, but the response is kind of this one, that there were going to come times this season, especially in the Liga, where Robert Lewandowski was going to be the reason why Barca come away with 3 points. I said it in the preseason predictions. He was my player of the season before this all began, and this is exactly why. In stoppage time, when Barcelona had not played their best, very similar to Mallorca or Celta de Vigo, Robert Lewandowski puts on his Superman cape, finishes the outside of his boot on a cross from Rafinha that was created by Pedri, and Barcelona walk out of Valencia with an undeserved 3 points. It should have ended 0-0. It should have been 1 point apiece. But because of Robert Lewandowski, Barcelona, by the skin of their teeth, are able to come away with the 3 points. And the reason I say they didn't really deserve it was because, yes, they had better opportunities on goal throughout the game. It was Robert Lewandowski on the header in the first half that probably should have put Barcelona in the lead. But they didn't take their chances in the second half. And I think we all kind of understood, it wasn't a matter of disbelief or anything, but I think we all kind of understood where it felt like that game was heading, and that should have been a 0-0 draw. Because just minutes before that, when Ferran Torres comes on and then misses that sitter, and I know people are going to want to talk about Ferran Torres and dog him in the comments, but this is really all I have to say. Ferran Torres, it's not necessarily the same story all season, but clearly a player lacking confidence. So me going in and saying they got to get rid of this guy in January and all that stuff, that does no good for Ferran Torres' confidence. This is a player that needs to put the ball in the back of the net more than just against Real Madrid and El Clasico, because oddly enough, that seems to be the only place this kid can score. But as we all know, I don't need to tell you, that miss with just 5 minutes ago, that's why this game felt like it was over. But alas, Barcelona went out and signed Robert Lewandowski for a reason. Yes, it was to advance to the Champions League, and we all know all the negative things about that, but it was also to try to win the Liga. And Robert Lewandowski, as I keep saying, is going to help Barcelona at least challenge for the Liga trophy. And this is a very thin line that Xavi is beginning to walk. I want to thank OneFootball for sponsoring this video. OneFootball is the app that I use to stay up to date on everything FC Barcelona. But more importantly, because you know I'm watching every minute of Barcelona action, it does help me stay up to date with all the teams that Alemany might be scouting and looking at players for the next big transfer window. With a custom-tailored homepage, stay up to date with breaking news, live scores, and even transfer news. While on the go, you can check with matches in live time and watch those La Liga highlights afterwards. And especially if you're in a place defending the good name of the Liga against other teams. Say in the UK and Ireland, you can watch the Liga highlights on the go and let them know that it's not just Real Madrid and Barcelona, regardless of what the table says. So use the link down in the description below for a free download of the OneFootball app on Android or iOS to put all your football in one place. And you also help out a tiny Barca channel like this one too. Thanks again to OneFootball. Now back to all things FC Barcelona. 2 is still shaken. I didn't know how to talk about how sloppy Barcelona were, especially in that first half. But all of Pedri, who did have a good game on the day, Ter Stegen, who had some good moments, Lewandowski, who scores the winner, Dembélé, and De Jong, and a few other players too. They all had moments, especially in the first 45, where you felt like that haze, like that punch from Bayern Munich. I mean, that final kick of being knocked out of the Champions League, truly, that was still weighing on them greatly. And the players said as much in the postgame too, that they were disappointed by the earlier results in the week. And so while they wanted to come out and prove something, it still felt a bit like they were running through quicksand. And that's the bad news, that Barcelona were sloppy, that emotionally, as I keep saying, they're not on the same level as the Bayerns and the Real Madrid. And usually a changing manager is what does the trick. But it's not a defense of Xavi as much as say that maybe Barcelona still haven't even found that voice that needs to change. And I think it's a voice that has to come in the locker room more than it does in the dressing room as far as the manager goes. Because whether it was Quique Setien, or Valverde, or Koeman, or Xavi, this team carries their losses from game to game in a way that Real Madrid and Bayern Munich just don't. But it is in a way like the Arsenals, like the Manchester Uniteds, even like the Sevillas and the Villarreals and Atletico Madrid. Those are all teams that aren't Real Madrid and aren't Bayern Munich, and they do seem to take one punch in the mouth into the next game. I mean, you think Barcelona fans would have been disappointed from a 0-0 draw with Valencia? Try being Atletico Madrid fans today with what actually happened against Cadiz, when Cadiz gets that winner after Atletico Madrid had come fighting back 2-2. After getting eliminated from the Champions League on that PK that was missed by Carrasco, after they hit the post on the rebound. It's a rough week to be an Atletico Madrid fan, and thankfully, Barcelona didn't have to join them. And so I do find myself in this weird middle ground, where I know a lot of people will say, especially after this match when they were sloppy, that Barcelona don't have the mental fortitude to survive. They're just not as elite as we say. That's why they're not in the Champions League. But I think that mentality that they have may be enough to survive in the Liga, because it seems to be a theme this season. The belief they do have is against opponents that, on paper, they should beat. And just like Mallorca, I said, just like Celta de Vigo, with the exception of Rayo Vallecano, which was the very first game of the season, every other time in the Liga that they should have dropped points, other than El Clasico, they didn't. They found a way through, and they did the same again today. So that's the good news, paired with the bad news of still carrying those demons with them. 3 is last man standing, from a bit of bad news to what could have been very, very bad news to further reports being a little bit less cataclysmic. That, fortunately, let's start with the headline, is that Jules Koundé, who goes down with that injury that we thought, oh no. I mean, oh no if you're a French fan, oh no if you want to watch the World Cup, but especially oh no for any Kool-Aid that just watched what happened this month without Ronald Araujo, without Jules Koundé for more than half of it. But fortunately, it seems like reports by both Koundé talking after the match and Xavi say that it was kind of just precautionary. It seemed like a slight overload, which makes sense. The weight of the world is on Jules Koundé's shoulder, and arguably, I mean, I said Pedri had his bad moments. Pedri also had really good moments in this game. But Jules Koundé, I thought, was the only player for Barca from minute 1 until he had to leave the match who could say it was a good day at the office for him. Just putting out fires, saving Eric Garcia's butt on a number of occasions in that first half. And speaking of Eric Garcia, you know, not to defend him, I know I'm going to get in trouble for this, but it seemed like maybe he was already carrying a little bit of a groin injury, and he also has been stretched a bit too far, because I think he's going to be out for more than just one game. He could be out until the World Cup or until that break. It's a left groin strain, so I can't imagine that Xavi is going to push him against Victoria Pilsen in a Champions League match with absolutely zero stakes. He'll definitely get rested for that one. Will he get rested next weekend? We'll have to see about that if he's healthy enough to go, but certainly we have seen Marcos Alonso deputized as the left center back. And then if Jules Koundé is healthy, and PK also being an option, likely I think PK will start midweek. But I say last man standing because at the end of that match, PK was the only center back of Barcelona's 5 who was able to play in that contest. Now, Andres Christensen is also expected to come back, but again, the headline had to be last man standing, because there was a moment today when I said, well, we don't exactly know when Christensen is coming back and what shape he is in, but we know Ronald Araujo is out through at least the World Cup for Barcelona and maybe out for the World Cup for Uruguay as well. We'll have to see about that. And then Jules Koundé, at that point, had possibly gone down. Eric Garcia had gone down. So that left just Gerard Piqué, the man who I think after Inter Milan had expected to never play for FC Barcelona again, but here he is once more. Again, hopefully the news in the moment was much worse than what we now know. And so hopefully Barcelona is healthy enough to, again, I don't care who plays against Victoria Pilsen. Like, I don't care if Xavi signs you up at home and you get thrown out there instead of Gerard Piqué. Doesn't matter to me. But at least closing out the remaining few games until the World Cup break, and then hopefully everyone gets healthy for the second half of the season when Barcelona still, as I said, can have to fight for 4 trophies. Because if Eric wasn't dealing with early signs of a groin strain, boy, in the first 42 minutes he was on the field, it was real bad today. So there is really no defense other than maybe it was an injury. I obviously, even with a good groin, he's not a tremendous defender, but his defending was putrid in the first 42 minutes today. Lucky not to get a second yellow card. Interestingly enough, he goes off the field. Marcos Alonso almost picks up an immediate red. So certainly the alarm bells are ringing. And speaking of red, it felt like code red at the back. It still may throughout times this season, at least until the World Cup break. And, this back line obviously truly needs a lot of work. Headline 4 is past, present, and future. Kind of sticking with the theme of the back line. It was interesting to see Marcos Alonso. I mean, that was the least interesting. We're not talking about him. But Marcos Alonso, Gaia being Valencia's left back, and then Jordi Alba and Alejandro Balde starting at the right back for Barcelona. So at least for the Spanish national team, I mean, Luis Enrique, if he wants to think about the left back spot, all those players that he picked in the preliminary squad, he really only has to watch this match, because I think 1 through 4 from that preliminary squad were all playing in this match and all played the second half at least Alonso coming on in the 42nd minute. So they all played at least 48 minutes today against one another. For Gaia, you both saw why Barcelona has been linked with him, why they would want him to not only deputize, but be that 1-2 punch with Balde, why he was the plan before Bellerin and before Marcos Alonso, because it was all kind of summed up by that counter by Barcelona, where they're off to the races, a tremendous ball from Ter Stegen over the top to Fati. Fati feeds it in for Lewandowski, and Gaia just runs all the way over and almost stayed as a right back for a few minutes afterwards, put out all the fires as well. From the left back spot for Valencia, you could see why he's their captain, why he's their spiritual leader, and why he is the one, not to say club legend, but when they lost Dani Parejo and those other experienced players, why they needed him to stick around, because this team had to have a player like Gaia in their force. And then Jordi Alba, one of the players for Barca that I have really nothing to say, believe it or not. I think maybe the only one who he had okay moments. He didn't have any really terrible Alba moments that he's capable of, but he also didn't really truly affect the game either. It was a good job by Valencia to kind of pin him back enough, but as I said, he defended well enough. It was fine. I mean, I think if he had defended a bit better, Eric Garcia wouldn't have been stretched so far. So Alba was caught upfield a number of times, and that did pull Eric Garcia out of position, which meant that Koundé did have to put out some fires, and that is kind of put on Alba's positioning. And then finally, for Balde, who's playing right back, arguably Barcelona's best player, other than Koundé and, again, Pedri, for about 60 minutes or so, maybe Barcelona's best player on the field today, playing at right back out of position. Now, the only thing to fight that is that he and Dembélé did not work well together at all. I think it's, once again, because Balde is playing as a right back, where he is severely left foot dominant, and it just wasn't working. There was no partnership. The spacing was off. But as far as the defensive side of the ball, and when he would, that one first touch that brought it down, and yes, it ended with nothing, because I think he had a hard time making his final decision in the final third, but that 45, 50-yard run from Balde, when again he brought it down perfectly, put himself in the path and was off to the races. A number of times he just called his own number and got forward and was really defensively up to it today. With the exception of the goal that for Valencia should have been there 1-0 but was called off because of Marcos Andre getting his hand on it. If he doesn't touch that, then Balde, just awful defending as Lino rose up over him and scores that goal against Ter Stegen. So Valencia should have been up 1-0 because of Balde's terrible defending, but instead it's a handball, so it's taken off, and then Balde can say, well, if that one doesn't count, I had a really good day, and Balde did. To be that good at right back, where a young player you'd expect him to be totally out of sorts by switching to the opposite flank, he looked really good. So that was really positive from Balde again, and as I said, for Luis Enrique, in just one match you could watch the past in Alba, the present in Alonso and Gaia, and then the future in Balde of the Spanish national team. Interesting final note for both Barca and Valencia. Valencia ended this match also with 3 natural left backs on the field, just like Barca did. So it was 6 total. Of the 22 players on the field, 6 of them were natural left backs. I don't know when the last time I had ever seen that. I don't think we will see something like that. It's nonsense. And headline 5 is off the mark. 1 old and 1 young, which means we're going to interpret this differently. Busquets was off the mark today. He's been off the mark for a little bit, and I think because of the negative reaction, there are kind of rumors, and when there's smoke, there's fire. But the reaction that Busquets is getting, the hate he is getting, there was always a bit of the camp who would always argue in years past kind of get on him. But it seems like the collective has now said, Busi might be past it. It might be time for him to start to, if he's not sailing into the sunset already or walking on his horse into the sunset already, then maybe it's time he's starting to make travel plans. And it feels like the collective, including myself, is beginning to say those things or is fully saying those things. And this is another match where it felt like Busquets was sloppy. He was off the mark. I think it was all summed up in this play in the 27th minute where he was intending to play a through ball, I think to either Lewandowski or